Hello, YouTube friends. Dustin Bellinger here. I am doing a contest response video for Dead Guy Cardboard. I want to congratulate him on 750 subs, and he's quickly approaching 800 subs, so an outstanding achievement there. And he was wanting us to show some rare cards, and as I was compiling this video, I started looking at different cards in my registry and kind of going through the different uh, PSA sets and looking at cards I had, that had a total population of 50 or less in all grades. And after about 50 different sets that I'd come across where I had a card with an example that was that low, and many of them were 20, I realized I wasn't identifying a lot of really good uh, rare cards, but more just cards that didn't get graded a lot. And so I kind of scrapped that idea, and here I'm just going to show you some cards that I kind of think are rare and that you probably won't see on very many channels other than mine here in the community. So this one here is a 1933 Tattoo Orbit. Not a lot of these survived because of the way they were designed. It was designed kind of to be a magic photo. You'd wet the surface and it would reveal the player on the card. And so, you can imagine exposure to water. A lot of these might have been ruined at the time. The image it created isn't super great, so maybe people didn't save them as often. But in any case, the survival rate is extremely low on these, and SGC and PSA combined have graded 5 copies of this card. So that's about as low population as you're going to get. There are, I'm sure, a few rare raw copies out there waiting, floating around that aren't holdered, but I can't imagine that, say, it's more than a dozen or two, but you never know. And so this one here is a 1934 Gaudi Premium. These were, a rare premium, the really large size, the thin, very thin paper stock to them, really susceptible to damage. I think the ones that survived, a lot of them got put in scrapbooks, and this one was trimmed on all 4 sides, and the corner's been torn, the chunk out of it. But I've seen a few of these appear on eBay, and I know one member of the community that has Hank Greenberg that he showed for this video, but that's all I've ever seen of this particular set. So definitely something that is more rare than not. And this here is from 1940s team set. These are hard to pin down the exact year that it's from because Boston Red Sox, they kept their team photo packs the same size year after year, and if a guy stayed on the team, they would use the same photo. And, of course, Bobby Doerr was on that team for a long time throughout the 40s, and you still don't find very many of these available. So, if a guy that was on the team throughout the decade is hard to find, imagine how much more rare somebody that might have only been on the team for 1 or 2 seasons could be to track down. This one here is kind of a regional issue. It's from Dixie Creamery ice cream lids. The PSA population on these is very low, but it's you can track these down. So in this case, I think that's more of a case of, well, they just aren't popular aren't a popular set to grade, and there aren't as many collectors of these, so they're just not as desirable. So that's, I think, kind of more contributes to the low population. And this is the type of item that's kind of a good representation of a lot of things that are in my collection. Here's another team issue item of the uh, LA Dodgers team issues from 1960. It's a Sandy Koufax. This is probably the Koufax item I own with the lowest population, maybe a dozen or so. I can't remember what the it might have been over 20 on this one as far as PSA population. But when you consider his rookie card has thousands of PSA graded examples, something with less than 50 seems to be rather rare. This here is a 1960 Cons Wieners, which was a regional issue. This is one of Frank Robinson. Got this sent away to PSA, waiting to get it back. Shout out here to Joey Brings It, who has an awesome example of a 1956 Cons Wiener card of Frank Robinson from his rookie season, which just an outstanding item and probably one of the most rare items of Frank Robinson that exists. Now, this here is a 1965 team issue for Gaylord Perry. I know there was less than 10 of these that are PSA graded. I can't remember the exact number now. I was checking them all the other night. And once again, these team issues are just so much more difficult to track down. And, with the large size, a lot of them just didn't survive in decent condition because, they're more difficult to store. Then here's another example of a 1970 team issue for Gaylord Perry. This one too, has I think 6 or 7 graded examples by PSA, and this 8 here is probably one of the highest that's ever been graded. I think there might have been one that was graded higher. I just don't remember the details now, but none of these, a lot of these, weren't that expensive to acquire, even though they're relatively rare and obscure, because, the rarity is something that just doesn't always get appreciated in our collecting community. And unfortunately, rarity can also work against the value of something, because if there isn't enough for people to really kind of be aware of it, for it to be popular enough to have enough people that are willing to try and collect that set and be competing against each other to purchase those cards, it can really hinder that, where the cards will be unknown and they'll just kind of slip through auctions unnoticed. And that's how I've acquired a lot of these items that I would say are rather rare, is just because there isn't a strong collecting base for them, just because they aren't within kind of the traditional things that people look for. And this one here is one of my more rare Roberto Clemente items. Once again, due to the large size of it, it kind of excludes a lot of these from getting graded. But still, it's not one that's easy to locate of his at all. This one here is probably one of the most rare items I've ever acquired. This is an uncatalogued Wheaties Premium from the 1930s. It's a Hall of Famer Earl Averill. It's just, it's hard to explain exactly how rare these are. They're difficult to find. People really don't know much about them. And a lot of times, if they do show up on eBay, the description of them isn't good at all. And so that makes them even more difficult to find and track down. I searched for this for a couple of years and was able to get one. And then I got it pretty cheap, just because I don't think anybody else really recognized what it was. And it's also been trimmed, which would damage the value. But like I said, when you go years without seeing one at all, a trimmed one, you got to be willing to make sacrifices sometimes. And it's like the time to buy it is when you can find it. And so this here is a 1970 Boston Red Sox team issued postcard. There's only 11 of these that have been graded. This, obviously is a 1. It's got a few issues. There's a stain on the back of the card. It's got small bits of paper loss and a crease here. But like I said, an item like this, I'm happy to have the lowest graded copy that's ever it's available, just because, well, it is so rare. And this one here is kind of my mystery item. This is an item, it's listed as a 71 team issue card, but that's not correct. The team issues in that year were black and white. I've tried a number of times to try and identify this item. It's could possibly be a proof of some sort, but I can't find anything where the image matches. So it's really hard to track down. I've talked to a guy that's a pretty serious Yastrzemski master set collector, and he hasn't seen it, doesn't know what it is. And so, for all I know, this might be a one-of-a-kind proof item. And I have it, but it doesn't have a huge value because, well, it's too rare to be really highly notable. There are some things where being too rare can definitely be a hindrance, and I think this is probably a case in this item. So those are some of my rare cards. I've got other stuff that probably counts as rare, but I didn't want to make this ungodly long, but I hope you enjoyed it. Congratulations again to Dead Guy Cardboard, and I will talk to you all again next time. Take care.